And it's showtime. Good afternoon. I'm Trudy Murata, volunteer community ambassador with AARP Virginia. From our earliest beginnings, AARP has championed lifelong learning, and that's why AARP Virginia is thrilled to bring you our 5th year of Tuesday Explorers, a lifelong learning program offered every Tuesday from January through May at 3 o'clock East Coast time for our curious explorers. During the month of April, we are exploring ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So I think you'll all be both entertained as well as educated by some of the folks that we've got coming up for you here in April. For more than 60 years, AARP has been a wise friend and a fierce defender, helping individuals to ensure that their money, health, and happiness live as long as they do. AARP has earned that reputation as this friend and defender through trusted information, tools, advocacy designed to protect the health and financial security of older Americans and empower them to choose how they live as they age. By promising to act as this wise friend and fierce defender, AARP is helping people who are 50 plus and their families feel confident, in control, and secure as they age. As this friend in your corner, AARP can help you protect yourself and your loved ones from fraud through our Fraud Watch Network program. Get healthy and stay healthy, care for loved ones, make connections, plan a trip, learn new technologies, attend a class, and have fun, like what we're doing today with our Tuesday Explorer program. So I hope you'll continue to take advantage of these opportunities and more. But now let me introduce you to our guest today. Today we have Jane Hess Collins. Jane is the founder and has previously served as the first executive director of HERD. She's a communications consultant and a coach with a master's degree in public relations and corporate communications from Georgetown University and a retired colonel, United States Air Force. Jane founded the nonprofit to offer a platform for both artists and the area's adults in need to be heard. Artists are heard by receiving a fee for each class they teach, a feature that Jane implemented after watching her mother, an artist, continually get asked to lower the price of her work. HERD's clients are also heard through choosing to share their creative work during class or on HERD's website. In her spare time, Jane and her husband love to travel and spend time with their families. So with that, Jane, I'm going to turn the platform over to you.
Oh, thank you, Trudy. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. And first thing I want to do is thank you. Thank Trudy and Amber and Lynn O'Connell, who made this introduction and made this all happen. And mostly thank you to AARP, because holy smokes, my mother, the artist, did pass away about a year and a half ago, and I was the lead kid, right? And advocating for her. And it was a real first bird's eye view of how much older people need advocacy, how much they need the support of AARP championing for them, for the laws and the rules. And I'm just so glad you exist. So thank you. Um, I, where would you like me to start?
Um, well, let's start with how you transitioned from a military career to founding a nonprofit organization. How did that start?
Well, and I'm going to be peeking over a bit because I did take notes, because good military people learn to be prepared and to pay attention to detail and to have their notes. So that's what I'm doing. And it wasn't a transition. It's more like it sort of built up over time. Um, I was the joke is, at least the joke I make is, I do have a 20-year retirement. I am retired active duty Air Force, but it took me almost 30 years to get there. It took me 28 years. I went active duty. I went into the reserve for a long time. Then I went back on active duty. And when you add all those days up, it comes out to over 20 years. I tell people I'm like the kid you can never get through college, but I finally did retire, get through college. And so, especially being in the reserve, I had opportunities to do other things. And so, way back, this was 1993, I was at Soesterberg Air Base in the Netherlands. They're closed now. And at the time, I had just left active duty. I'd gone into the reserve, and I was a civilian, a local hire. And well, I was also a military wife at the time to somebody I'm no longer married to. And then we separated and I moved back to the US. And the reason I'm telling you this is then I started being what we call a reserve bum. I would be an assignment. I would just hop from assignment to assignment. I would be different places. I'd be this base for a couple of months, this base for a couple of months. It was kind of an adrenaline rush. I really liked it. But when I was at Eglin Air Force Base, and this is where I'm actually answering your question, um, I was there for 3 months in an F-15 fighter wing. And the fighter pilots had just deployed to somewhere in the Gulf. It was one of the Gulf Wars. And back then, women had just been allowed to fly fighters. So at this time, it was still all men flying the planes, right? And the squadrons, the fighter squadrons, and there were 6 of them, each had spouse clubs, wives clubs. And so part of my job as the public affairs officer for this wing was to go to the spouse clubs and during one of their monthly meetings and talk to them, public affairs points, speaking points. Like if somebody approaches you off base and, puts the microphone in your face and asks you something, what's the best way to respond? Media training. And as I did that, I also, was going through a kind of a tough personal time. So I decided in my spare time, I would work in the local Fort Walton Beach domestic violence shelter. And that was an incredible eye opener. And what I realized was they had no resources. So when I went to the different squadrons to talk about the media points and the Gulf War and that kind of thing, I had written to the president of each of the 6 spouse clubs, told them about the domestic violence shelter, and said, would you donate a bunch of diapers? Would you donate some food? Would you donate some clothes for the moms? Would you donate some baby clothes? And so I was able to bring all that together during these spouse presentations. So eventually there was one day where the spouses rolled up, this caravan of SUVs bringing out diapers and food and clothes and formula and all this stuff to the shelter that was chronically under-resourced. And the shelter director just burst into tears. She was just so overwhelmed with the help, the support, and the things. And I heard the spouses talking to her saying, we're going to take you in, we're going to take care of you, we're going to make sure that you're always good. And what that told me was, that was a lot of good that could happen. And, it took me an hour, right? I wrote letters. That was back when letter writing was done more than emails. I wrote a letter and said, hey, would you do this? So it was very little effort on my time. And the reward was exponential. And that's always been kind of my focus as I've done different things, was to go for maximum impact without it taking over my life. And I've got a bunch more examples, but that's the first one.
I'm sure it did. So how did that transition into starting a nonprofit?
Well, I retired in 2009. And by then, I had done other things. During my reserve time, I started going on service vacations, and that's a whole other thing. I was in India on 9/11 after a year of Air Force graduate school, and all these things were happening. And I realized I wanted to go into the nonprofit sector. I knew I was not built to be a full-time, wear the suit, be corporate kind of person. That's just not who I am. And I had done so many things during my active duty time and my spare time that I knew nonprofit work was what was calling me. Also, and this is probably the most critical, my dad, he had a double bypass when he was 50 years old. I was in college, and 50 seemed really, really old at the time. Um, but he was very Christian, very Catholic, and he decided that God had given him a second chance. So He owned a small lumber yard in Bellefontaine, Ohio, and he decided that if he lived, he would give 1% of the gross profit from his lumber yard to the poorest village in the Western Hemisphere. And he did. And so as that happened, he was helping a village. In 2 years, they had running water, they had electricity, they had schools. Their population doubled because dad was able to give them resource. And he always said all he did was write a check. Again, another example of incredible impact. His life was not disrupted. And so that has always stuck with me. So as I went into the nonprofit work, I started out as a charity writer. I used to volunteer throughout the DMV and write about it. It was posted in Washington Life. It was actually posted on AARP for a while under Create the Good. Then I worked for a small nonprofit, and then I realized I need to be the boss. So I spent a year in 2016 looking for the unmet need in Alexandria, Virginia, because Alexandria is very generous and a lot of needs are met. And I realized after more coffee meetings than I could even count that there was no market, so to speak, to allow for unheard adults to be heard. There was no opportunity for creativity. And so many adults who, for one reason or another, were passed by or not recognized or not helped as kids, um, have become, for lack of a better term, broken, unheard adults. So we started out as a writing group. I had saved enough money from my work at this nonprofit that I was going to pay the artists for 10 classes a month for 5 years, and then we would all pat ourselves on the back and go home. And of course, that's not what happened. So we grew and we grew, and that's the story. I can talk for a couple of hours, but I really don't think you can hear that. So,
Was there like a pivotal moment or an aha moment that led you to start Herd? Anything in particular?
uh, I think it was a culmination of things. It was a couple of examples that I had listed, helping the domestic violence shelter. I had gone on 6 service vacations to some of the poorest parts of the world by then. Um, while I was active duty in my spare time, I and a friend had started a TV show at Fairfax Public Access called Get Out and Give Back, where we would bring in nonprofit people and have them share their work, hopefully to bring them donors. Um, and then, yeah, I think I always knew I wanted to be in the nonprofit sector. And again, after that year of research and conversation and looking for the unmet need, because you don't want to duplicate something somebody's already doing, right? I discovered that this was a void in the market, and I filled it.
Excellent. How did you end up modeling at, I'm not going to say the age, but how did you end up
Oh, that's fine.
And
I'm
what was
60.
that experience like for you?
It's been so random. I'm 67 years old. And what I left as the executive director. We hired a new executive director in November of 2023. I mean, I'd run it for 7 years. I was ready for something new. And I'm figuring out what to do. And back when I left, my first marriage broke up in 1993. I'd moved back to this area and I was, looking for a job. And I had done a little bit of makeover work, makeup things while I was at Susterberg as kind of a side hustle. And so, as part of looking for, my mindset at the time was, defense work, contractor, that kind of thing, because that was my universe. I went into Bloomingdale's in Tyson's Corner, up to HR, and I was thought, well, maybe I can get a counter job part time while I, get established. And they offered me a job as the counter manager of the Chanel makeup counter. And I turned it down because my mind was all about, corporate and defense and continuity and stability. And, I just wasn't ready for that. But part of me always thought, what would have happened? How would have my life had turned out if I'd done that? Because, there's glitz and there's glamour and all that kind of stuff. And that always kind of intrigued me. So in after stepping away from Herd in 2023, I kind of went back to that and I thought, well, I can always find out, right? So I got trained as a makeup artist. And then I started kind of in the same model as Herd. I'd work with I'd learned knew other stylists by then. So I would get hairstylists, makeup artists, photographers, as other stylists were doing. Carla Presley, as a wonderful example, she was my mentor in this. I would go back to the nonprofits I knew of in Alexandria. Together We Bake, Friends of Guest House, The Shelter, and we would put on these makeover events. And one of the women who was on this team, I saw on Instagram one day, she had gone to Coco Roach's model camp. And knew who Coco was. I knew she had this model camp. I looked at the site and I thought, why not apply? Because I've been turned down before. It's not going to hurt. And I applied. And I was as shocked as anybody to find out that I was accepted. And I did go to her camp in New York for 4 days last October. And that's where it all began.
You're a model.
Isn't that funny? I know. I know. Now I feel like everyone's looking at me like, ew. But yeah, it's been I think the message here is at 67, you don't know where life is going to take you, right?
That's
So
exactly right. That's
I
exactly right.
I have been in a couple of shoots and we'll see where it goes. So enjoy the ride.
So you're, in addition to your military career, you
Mhm,
are making sure that people are heard. You are making sure that people are seen
mhm.
as well. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced? Um, I guess most likely in starting Herd, and how did you overcome them?
Well, the biggest challenge, and you know what, I knew that was a question. What did I say? I can't find the answer, so um, you never know how it's going to turn out, right? You have this idea, you've thought it through as well as you can, you've done your research, you've done your homework. We had a skeletal plan. Again, the plan back then was going to be I would just fund it because I had the resources set aside. Um, and sometimes you just have to go on faith. And I started out very small. Again, like I said, we started out as a writing group, and we were meeting in a church basement. Well, in January, people don't want to go to a church basement, but the program, the ones that showed up seemed to like it. So that's when I started contacting these nonprofits who I already knew from my volunteer writing work and just said, hey, I'm starting this thing up. I will bring a writer to you. You don't have to pay for it because, small nonprofits, every $10 counts. Um, I will take care of that, but how would you like a creative writing class? So we started out with a nonprofit that called Together We Bake, who gives women baking skills and life skills, women who need a second chance. And it worked. So that gave me the confidence to say, where else can I go? So I went to Friends of Guest House, who work with women transitioning from incarceration back to the community. And that worked. It was one by one. And I started thinking, okay, whose life is miserable? Whose life is just awful and nobody hears them or sees them? And the immediate answer was the Northern Virginia Juvenile Detention Center, right? Kids in juvenile detention. Although I preferred adults, I really felt like these kids needed help. So I approached them. And then as our writers grew, I started thinking about other arts. I had taken improvisation. I know the value of improvisation. So I went to the improvisation teachers at the Little Theater of Alexandria, brought them in. And then people started reaching out to me. Writers would say, hey, I heard about you in book club. I want to work for you. So it grew literally one by one by one by one by one.
How do you
As
go
far
about selecting the individuals that you work with as you go through these different transitions and different types of services?
That is a wonderful question because you have to be very careful who you choose to do this kind of work. And so when I would put out a call or let people know I was looking for artists, I would say, and that my criteria was very exacting. I wanted professionals. I wanted the people that we serve, the incarcerated, the immigrants, the LGBTQA community, to have the same level of professional experience that a paying client would have. So I would take people who were professionals. Maybe they had a degree in that field. Maybe they've been shown if they're an artist. I had personal interviews with each one. I did background checks. I made sure they had big hearts. But I also made sure, and this is really important, that they understood the importance of boundaries because you have to have professional boundaries with the people you serve. I know I had a couple of examples where people, uh, good-hearted, but would come in with agendas. I remember talking to a woman once I didn't hire who had an incredible resume, master's in fine arts and all this stuff. And she told me that she had a lot of stuff to work through and um, she was going to fix these people that needed help. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. Um, Oops, they're still there. And I would have training. Dr. Tasha Golden is a world leading expert in arts and boundaries. And we would have sessions with her so they could establish boundaries because it's very easy, if you have any empathy at all, to get pulled in by these people's stories because, my God, they're just horrendous. Um, but yes, I made very clear that we got the right kind of personality and also the right technical skill. I had a lot of people um, contact me who, wrote poetry in their spare time, wrote stories in their spare time, liked to draw. And I would say, I'm sorry, no, I needed professionals because the clients we work with deserve that.
Sometimes it's hard to say no.
Mhm.
Where does the strength come from to be able to say no in those circumstances?
Oh, I'm good at saying no. I think you can thank the military for that one.
Okay.
Sometimes it's my favorite word. Um,
We have some on the screen, we have heard serving women and girls in need. How did you ensure that heard heard both the clients and the artist and found value in the program?
oh, and first, yes, serve women and girls in need. We also serve men. We served everyone that needed to be heard. Most of the incarcerated we work with are men. Um, but yes, and aside from incarceration, I would say a lot of the people we work with were, again, women and girls. Um, I took care of them as best as I could, them being the artists, and then through that, the clients. In the Air Force, one of the sayings we had was, you take care of the people take care of the mission. And my approach was, if I take good care of our artists will take good care of the clients, assuming, they have the proper training and those kinds of things. So at the end of most sessions, not, maybe one-offs, but maybe if we did a weekly series for 2 months, we had evaluations. And I know you may want to talk more about evaluations, but evaluations of the program, but then also each year after we had established our core competencies, I asked the artists for evaluations of me, of this program. And overwhelmingly, you can't please everyone all the time, but it was incredibly strong. In fact, one just said, every time I work with her, I feel like it's Christmas. And the artists would tell me so many times how meaningful their herd work is, not only because they're watching, they are helping people be seen. And there's lots of crying at our sessions, but because I paid them, because I realized I knew from watching my mother's heartbreak when she would be so devalued for her very good work, how important it was for an artist to be compensated. And that's a way of being seen and heard. Sometimes I've spoken to different groups before, and I'll say, all right, group, artists, how many of you have ever been expected to give your skills away for free because you're an artist? And they all raise their hand, every single one. And so they have felt so validated because I know that their time and talent is worthy of compensation.
Yeah, their skills have value.
Absolutely.
All skills have value.
Yeah.
Can
Yep.
you talk a little bit about the role of community feedback, and being responsive to the community that you had been serving?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have three communities in my view. We have the art team, we have the clients we serve, and we have the nonprofits that we partner with. And the clients, we would ask for feedback again at the end of many of the sessions. The art team and the nonprofit partners, we would have an evaluation at the end of, December of every year. And plus, there was always informal feedback. I've had, nonprofit executive directors call me, email me. Most of the time, again, you can't please all people all the time, but mostly to say, oh my gosh, this was phenomenal. Or, hey, could you have this person do this next time? Or we need a dance person. Can you find me a dance person? But that was my community. And our evaluations were, a lot of it was verbal, but then there was also, the criteria based on our competencies, the scale of 1 to 5, all those kinds of things. If you go on our website, herdnova.org, and look under impact, I know up until through 2023, every time we got feedback, I would post it. I was very transparent about everything we did. I think funders appreciated that, but so did everybody else.
Very good. I'm kind of leading the questions here, but I do want to open it
Sure.
up to our audience. If you have any questions that you would like me to direct to Jane, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as time allows. Can you share a particular success story,
Um,
impact that Herd had on the community?
oh my gosh, how much time do you have?
As much as you need.
It was so rewarding. But I think my favorite story, one of the things we did was we had writing contests in the Alexandria and the Arlington, Virginia jails. And the judges would be people in the community, editors, publishers, the poet laureates, et cetera. And there would be a ceremony and stuff. But back when we started, I think 2018, we had our first writing contest in Alexandria. And I remember a woman there was incarcerated and she won second place in nonfiction. It was fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And it was something about how to stop a stroke or something like that. And she had been a nurse. So a year or two later, I'm in Friends of Guest House, which is the nonprofit that works with the women transitioning out of prison. And she approached me, and I didn't recognize her. And she said, "Are you Mrs. Collins?" I'm like, "Oh God, what did I do now?" And I said, "Yes." And she introduced herself as the second place winner of the writing contest. And then she said, "Thank you for letting me feel like a human." And that just absolutely floored me. And it just made me realize how many people, especially the incarcerated, just feel so unheard, so unseen, so less than human because of life, bad luck, bad choice, I don't know. But because of where they are, they will always carry that label, and the totality of them is gone. And I've seen that over and over in so many of our work with the incarcerated. Um, so yeah, that is the leading example of validation for the work that we do.
One of our guests has asked, did any of your artists ever include musicians?
Um, Trying to think. I don't think so, only because it was I've been asked that before. My struggle was, okay, how do I get 18 guitars in here? How do I get 18 pianos in here? How do I do that? Um, so I think music would have been a phenomenal um add, but what I did do though, I did have a professional singer. She was an opera singer, and we had Christmas caroling at the Juvenile Detention Center one year. And 2 summers ago, she and I went to the Alexandria Detention Center on every Wednesday night for 12 weeks and did singing lessons and karaoke. And there were only 3 or 4 guys that regularly showed up, but holy smokes, those guys could sing. One guy had sung Ave Maria in his high school class at the Parthenon in Greece decades before. Another guy could sing like Josh Groban so well that it made that hair stand up on my arm. And again, it just proves to me that you are not your worst mistake, right? You're not your worst decision. And those guys said that's the only thing they had was music, 1 hour a week when we were there. That's the only thing they had to look forward to.
Interesting. It may be outside of your wheelhouse, but I'm going to ask the question for our guest. Do you have any exposure to volunteer vacation organizations where individuals would go somewhere else to
Yeah,
provide volunteer opportunities?
because I've been on a lot of them.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I would, all I would say now is do your due diligence. In 2000, I made a bet with, this is another one of the lead up stories. In 2000, I made a commitment to myself to do 3 things the following year. Well, in 2000, in 1999, that I'd never done before. And one of them was to take a service vacation. So Google was barely operating, but I found out about Global Volunteers. It's globalvolunteers.org. And I flew to Ecuador and spent 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something at a site teaching recreation of all things to indigent children with cerebral palsy. And that was one of those experiences where my life took a hard right turn. Since then, I will tell you, there is this proliferation of service vacations. They've gotten some really bad press. And if you're thinking about it, you need to do your due diligence. There's good ones out there and there's bad ones out there. The last one I took was on my 60th birthday in 2018. And 4 of us flew over to Chiang Mai and spent a week in an elephant rescue sanctuary. Um, and it was so hard to find an ethical one that we almost didn't go, but we did. Um, but you've just got to be careful because a lot of people are in it for profit. A lot of them, well, not a lot of them, it has been known that some nonprofits will bring in local children just to put on the show that these kids are orphans and they're not. But yeah, just do your homework, do your research. I found it very rewarding. The argument is, you're supposed to let, communities do their own work, and that's true. But if you're not there, I would not give money to these places had I not gone. I would give money locally and give my time locally. So yeah, do your research, and if you go, pick a good one and enjoy the life change.
We have another guest who says she is a self-taught artist and would like to help. She's good in a number of things that included meditation and breathing exercises. Where would be a good place for her to get started?
Um, I would say look at the nonprofits in your community and offer to volunteer there. I mean, unless you want to be compensated, and that's a whole different thing. But yeah, almost every community has a shelter for abused, well, women, spouses, people. Shelters need that kind of work. Um, Community, I can't think of the word, places for people who are um, not housed need that kind of work, especially the meditation, the yoga, the breathing. There's every community just has so much need, even if you have displaced or federal workers in your community who've recently lost their jobs. If you can work with like the local YMCA, YWCA, just rent, or maybe they'll donate you a room and put the word out on social media that you will offer a pro bono hour of meditation, anything like that. The need is there. Um, Find the nonprofit directors, find the program directors, and offer your services.
Excellent. Good advice. In any of the organizations you've been involved with, have you worked with individuals with cancer or with autoimmune diseases?
I have not. Um, no, I know that I have reached out to some people, organizations that work with cancer survivors for a makeover work. In fact, I think one of the reasons that compelled me to do these makeover events is in 2012, I went out to the City of Hope in California, where one of my best friends was recovering from a uh, stem cell transplant because she had cancer for the second time. And you'll all remember this because you're AARP. Do you remember Jacqueline Smith from Charlie's Angels?
Oh, sure.
So Jacqueline Smith and Jose Eber, that hairstylist to the stars back in the 80s, they came out one day and they did makeovers for all these women who were cancer survivors. And the more I think about that, I think that is probably one of the main reasons I do Seen by Jane now. And I dragged my friend because she is not a hair makeup girl at all, but I knew her mother would like it. So I pulled her over there. And, the first station you were outfitted with a wig and it was cut and styled, so it didn't look like a wig. The second station was the makeup. The third station was, it's almost like those 90s glamour shots, the boas and the hats and all that kind of thing. And then the last place was the professional headshot. And these women were just sobbing, because they had lost so much of their identity because of what they had gone through, that to be beautiful for a day just restored their soul. And that's what I found in Seen by Jane, is just seeing these women who have never seen themselves as beautiful or even felt like they were seen, even for a day, feel just beautiful and seen.
Jane, what other information or guidance can you share with us? I've tried to pull as much out of you as I possibly could in your career transitions and the different types of organizations that you've worked with to help. What have I not touched on that you would like to share with us?
Um, You can always do something. I know that's such a cliche. It's hard to even say that without rolling my eyes, but there's need everywhere. And just find out what interests you. If you do something because you feel like you have to, I think you're going to lose interest after a while. But find out what speaks to you. And there's going to be somebody who needs your skill and what interests you. There's going to be a match somewhere. And there's so many different ways. It could be the environment, it could be pets, it could be people, it could be, you know, any number of things. And just follow what your interests are first, I would say, because I think that will lead you to be more sustainable in your volunteer work.
Excellent. Very good. Jane, thank you so much. That's all the questions that I have from our audience. We do have a comment here saying that they're enjoying how real you are, that you truly live a life with purpose, and that is truly there. On
Thank
the
you. I think
screen,
that's a
we've got,
very
yeah,
diplomatic way of saying I'm khaki.
exact. On the screen, I've got any tips for running and starting your own nonprofit. What would you like to address based on what's on the screen at this point?
Um, well, it's starting and running your own nonprofit. I touched on the beginning. Don't give up, because there are times where you're like, oh my gosh, this isn't going to work. I quit. I don't want to do this. Um, and ask for help. If you're going to form a real 501(c)(3 like I did, you need a board. There's rules, there's state and federal rules that you have to follow. Um, but the way I set up HERD, and I think this is important, especially for people in our demographic, I set it up again, going back to maximum impact without being a chain to it my whole life, is I set it up so I could run it from anywhere in the world. And I set it up to make sure it was part-time. So literally, I could be in Thailand scooping elephant poop, and I could look at my phone and I could schedule somebody somewhere to go do this next week at this nonprofit. I remember I was with my mother as she was in kidney failure in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm holding her hand. With the other hand, I'm on my phone scheduling breakdancing for men in protective custody. Um, and that was very important to me. It goes back to knowing that I was not made to be, the full-time 8 or 10 hour a day corporate person. That just was not me. So know yourself. And I am a very firm believer that you can have, again, maximum impact and serve a great number of people without it taking over your whole life.
And
Um,
how do you get more people involved? Once you have the idea, you have the spark. How do you get more people involved? How do you ask for help?
that's a good question. And I did not actually, I set up Herd because I like to be the boss. I'm very bossy. And I set it up so I could do the whole thing. And yeah, I did all the scheduling. I wrote the grants. I wrote the contracts. I wrote all the text on the website. I did all of that. But having been retired from my first military career, I had the time. Um, but I knew people. I knew people in the nonprofit sector from the writing I had done. And then through my first two writers, as word got out, I they recommended people. And again, I had taken improv, so I knew an improv person. The art team would come to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I know this person. She is so good. She's a visual artist. You have to have her. You have to have her. She's phenomenal." And so when you have impact like we did, word gets out and people want to be part of you.
Very good. Anything else before I close this out for today, Jane?
Um, I'm looking at my notes, all the questions you didn't ask me. Um, well, I will say one thing I did. I realized that what I did in Herd could be replicated anywhere, right? It's using local artists to address local needs with local resources. So I actually created an online program, and no, I'm not pitching it, I swear, but I partnered with the Ohio Arts Council. And through them, I've been working with groups of Ohio communities in Appalachia. It was a 6-step, 90-minute each program where they would come with their need, and I would coach them through building a way to address that need through artists. So one place in Portsmouth, Ohio wanted to do public art in streets, and they now got an NEA grant for $50,000. My hometown now has an ongoing program where they have a weekly after school program for kids who are struggling with mental health challenges, where they take a rotation of music, theater, and writing. I'm working with another group right now who is offering different kinds of arts to different kids in a part of Ohio that is very underexposed to the arts. So anybody can do this. It just takes somebody to really who wants to do it.
Very good. Thank you, Jane. At the top of the show, I said that the month of April, we're talking about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I need to rephrase that when referring to you, extraordinary woman doing
Oh,
extraordinary things.
oh, thank you. Oh, that's so sweet.
So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us,
Okay.
sharing your time, your knowledge, and we've gotten lots of comments in here saying that this was wonderful. They enjoyed it and are taking some of your messages to heart as well, and inspirational too. So
Okay,
we'd
well, thank
love to
you.
get your feedback on today's program. We will put a link in the chat that you can click on, or we are recording today's program, so you will get a link to that recording, and the survey will be in that link as well. Next week, we'll be back on Tuesday, 3 o'clock East Coast time, with extraordinary storytelling by a Black filmmaker. And I think you will find that one both interesting as well. The calendar of all of our Tuesday Explorer events can be found at aarp.org/Tuesday Explorers, or if you're quick and want to use your phone to click on the QR code, that will take you directly there as well. So until next time, I would encourage you to stay curious and keep exploring. And hopefully, I will see you here next Tuesday. Jane, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Everybody,
Trudy.
have a great afternoon.
Bye.